Hello everyone, it's Anna, also known as Book Anna. Today's video is going to be another recommendations video, and today I decided to recommend 10 queer books to you guys. As it is a queer month of June, we are celebrating queerness, and I read a lot queer books this year and last year as well. There are so many great ones out there, and I'm sure you've seen some recommendations already from other great booktubers, but I also wanted to give some recommendations of the books that I didn't hear that many people talk about. I feel like they are just great books that you could read this month. I tried to be as diverse as possible and give you books from every genre because I am reading certain genres more. There's going to be more horror books involved or more sci-fi books involved, but I try to be still as diverse as possible. But we are starting with the most humoristic book, the most comedy-like book on this list. That is Greta and Valdin by Rebecca K. Reilly. I read this book 2 months ago, and it is one of my favorite books that I read this year. Probably going to be one of my all-time favorites. I just loved it. It's the most wholesome book I read in a while. Like I said, I really like a lot of horror books. This is a book about two siblings, Greta and Valdin, and we are partially following Greta's POV and partially following Valdin's POV. They're both in their mid-20s and they have quite a weird heritage. They are Russian Maori Catalonians and they're living in New Zealand. So this book takes place in New Zealand. They have this awesome family. It's a very weird family. They're kind of quirky, but they all love each other so much. It's a book full of a loving family, which is not something that you see quite often in books. I feel like a lot of books are about very problematic families because it's easier to write about something that is kind of, heartbreaking. It's easier to get some kind of emotion from a reader. But I feel this book did so much just because it was so wholesome and you could find kind of comfort in it. I at least found comfort in it, and I would recommend it to everybody. As I said, we are following Greta and Valdin. Greta is still in her post-grad studies. She doesn't really know what to do with her life, and Valdin has a degree in physics, but he decided to not be a physicist, and now he is hosting a TV show where he travels around the world. This book is definitely a character-driven book. If you are a romance reader and you want to get a little bit more into literary fiction, I would recommend this book to you definitely, because this is a completely lit fic book, but also there is a romance plot. Romance was portrayed in a way that I don't see very often, and I don't think it's very often written in books like that. It was so beautiful, like I said, so wholesome. And I would definitely recommend it if you're a romance reader and you just want to get a little bit more into literary fiction to try to read this book. Also, if you like books about families, this is definitely a book for you if you are searching for that true family book. It made me laugh so much, and by the end of the book, I was kind of sad because I didn't want it to finish. I love the characters so much. I feel like these characters are always going to be with me. And I just want to reread this book so badly. This book is great for this month because it's so very gay. And when I say so very gay, I mean very, very gay. That's my first recommendation. And now, because we are in literary fiction kind of mood still, the next book that I'm going to be recommending is Martyr by Kaveh Akbar. Kaveh Akbar is poet, so you can expect that this book is very lyrical, definitely. In this book, we are following our main character Cyrus, who is a recovering alcoholic, and he is kind of lost in his life. He has this very, very weird job. So his job is to essentially act out family members for interns in hospitals so they can practice how to tell bad things to family members when they need to, how to tell them that somebody they loved passed away or is very sick. He is the one who is acting as those family members for them to practice, which I never heard about that kind of job, and I didn't even know that existed, but it must be very hard to do it, definitely. And Cyrus, it has a very kind of tough life. So his mother disappeared years ago when he was a baby, and he's still thinking about her because her disappearance was really weird. And in this book, Cyrus is on this kind of a quest to become a martyr and to research martyrdom as much as he can. He ends up in New York, and he ends up connecting with this artist that is dying and is having her last performance in MoMA, kind of like Marina Abramovic had, but she talks to people a lot and he becomes friends with her, and through this talking with this woman we are finding out more about his family, and we are even getting POVs of his uncle and his mother when she was a child. It is a very heartbreaking book, but it's so beautiful, and it's a very quotable book as well. I feel like if you're somebody who really likes to underline a lot of things, I feel like you would love this book because there's so many great quotes. It's very lyrical, as I said, it's very poetic, and it's also a bit of philosophical, I would say. It is definitely one of those books that deserve as much hype as it gets. And book number 3, that is kind of still in this category, but we are kind of going into more of a horror category as well, is Monstrilio by Gerardo Cordova. Monstrilio is a book about grief and acceptance. So this book is kind of divided in 4 parts. Each part follows another character. We are starting with Monstrilio's mother, whose name is Magos. We are starting with her whilst she is grieving her child that sadly passed away, and she does not really know how to deal with this grief. There is this folklore, Mexican folklore, that says that if you cut out a piece of somebody's lung and nurture it, then maybe that person can come back to life. So she does just that. She cuts out a piece of her son's lung, she puts it in a jar, and she starts to nurture it and starts to care for it. And wouldn't you know, from that piece of lungs grows a little Monstrilio. The second person that we are following is mother's best friend, Lena. We are following her as she's trying to help her friend. Then we are following Monstrilio's father, Joseph, who is struggling, still trying to accept Monstrilio and everything. And in the end, we are following Monstrilio, who is put in this world without him really wanting to be in this world. And he's trying to become something that he isn't. It is a very monstrous book, and although it is in this horror category, it is put under horror genre, I would say it's still more of a literary fiction than horror, definitely, because the horror parts of this book is definitely just monstrosity of Monstrilio, how he looks, how he kind of acts sometimes. But in the end, this is more a book about grief and trying to get through it and trying to, accept everything that happened. Now, whilst we are in this horror category, let's just go a little bit more deeper in the horror. Next book that I have is something completely different. It is a bit more of a fantasy horror book, and it is a retelling. And we are now in Victorian age, and that book would be Our Hideous Progeny by C.E. McGill. This book is a feminist, queer retelling of Frankenstein. We have our main character, Mary, and Mary is, in Victorian age, a woman in STEM, which you can expect how good that goes, how well that goes for her. Mary is actually paleontologist, I believe, which is very rare. Her husband is as well. And she is struggling very much, as I said, because she's a woman. She's struggling to be recognized. She's struggling for her work to go somewhere. The work that she does is basically drawing for her husband's studies, but she does most of the work. She's better paleontologist than him. Mary is actually a great niece of Victor Frankenstein, and as we know, Victor Frankenstein from the original book, he made this monster. He reanimated human parts. And Mary finds his journals, and she decides that she would like to try something that is kind of similar to it. It tries to basically make a living dinosaur, some kind of dinosaur. And as I said, it's a queer book, but I'm not going to be telling why it's a queer book. You have to read it to understand why it is a queer book. I love this book very, very much. I had such a good time reading it because it really, the way it was written, it was really reading like a classical book. What I really loved about it also, that it is truly a retelling and reimagining of Frankenstein's story. I would recommend this book to people who love Gothic books, who love Gothic horror, who love classics, definitely. I would say this is a great way of retelling a classic. If you love Frankenstein, I would say you would probably be really happy with this retelling of it. And of course, because we are now in this kind of classic territory and horror Gothic classics, the next book that I'm going to be recommending is Carmilla by Sheridan. This is one of my favorite classics of all time. I talked about this book so much on my channel already. I already recommended it a few times, I think. But I just think it's a great book. I feel like it is very modern. It was written almost 200 years ago, and it is a very, very modern book. It is a queer book, definitely. If you do not know the story of Carmilla, Carmilla is basically a vampire, sapphic vampire story about relationship between two women. This book was written before Dracula, so if you already read Dracula, you know the story of Dracula. This is kind of like middle part of Dracula, but a lot better. I would say the writing is better, the storytelling is way better, the characters are so much better. I just loved it so much. Although it is a classic, it was written almost 200 years ago, as I said. You will probably find some things that you maybe not agree completely with. I think that if you are somebody, like I said, who loves Gothic stories, you definitely need to read Carmilla. Especially if you like queer stories, you definitely need to read Carmilla. That's out of the question. This year, there was a book that came out that was a retelling of Carmilla that I also read, and that is Hungerstone. Hungerstone is a book that also takes place in 19th century, but in this one, our main character is Lenore, and she is actually a married woman. She's in very loveless and childless marriage. And of course, one day this woman appears. This carriage topples over in front of their mansion, and this woman needs to rest. As original story of Carmilla goes, these women struck a relationship. If you read Carmilla, it is a queer book and it is a sapphic book, but the relationship between Carmilla and Laura is not that much on the nose. You kind of have to read between the lines to get to it. It's very clearly a sapphic relationship, but it's not very on the nose. In this one, however, it is very on the nose. This is a very queer, feminist book. I did enjoy it. I would still say Carmilla is a better one, but I do think this is one of the better retellings, definitely, that I read. This book is a lot more about desire between these two women and how it is, and passion between them. It is a kind of more of a book that is talking about oppression and gender roles. It has a modern twist on Carmilla. So if you already read Carmilla and you are looking for something that is kind of the same I would say to try to read Hungerstone. That is it for Gothic horror books. So I have another book that came out this year, and that is The Unworthy by Agustina Bazterrica. The Unworthy is a book that I would definitely not recommend to everybody. I think this book is full of triggers, and I would definitely say read trigger warnings for this book before going into it. It is a very hard book to get through. It's not very optimistic. If you already read Agustina Bazterrica's books like Tender is the Flesh, you know that she's not a very optimistic writer. She writes these crazy dystopian worlds with characters that are struggling through life, and everybody are just struggling so much. The Unworthy, I would say, is a lot heavier than Tender is the Flesh. I read both books this year. I reread Tender is the Flesh and I read The Unworthy for the first time. And I have to say, although I love Tender is the Flesh on the first reading, on the second reading, I kind of found a lot more things that I didn't really agree with and a lot more things that I didn't think were done that well. And I loved The Unworthy. I thought that it was an amazing book. Very, very sad book, but it was truly, you can see the author becoming so much better in conveying the story and the world. Although the Tender is the Flesh world was very on point, you could understand it, but this one is even better. This dystopian world is kind of based on what would happen to our world after many climate changes. Everything in this world is falling apart. There are no more cities, there is no more electricity or anything like that. Acid rain is falling from the sky. There's this convent, this sisterhood, in which we have our narrator. She is part of this sisterhood. These women kind of all came here because they didn't have anywhere else to go in this kind of world. So they just came here and they decided to stay because where else would they go? But the way the sisterhood is done, it is based on a hierarchy system. So we have the Unworthies, and then above the Unworthies we have Chosens and Enlightened. Each of these levels, the women that are on that level have to mutilate themselves even more. So these women are constantly mutilating themselves and doing a lot of awful things to their bodies because that is what he wants. And he is this male deity that is kind of overseeing this sisterhood, and everything they do for him. This book definitely talks about religious trauma. Our main character that is writing this story for us in everything that she can find. So she writes it in dirt, she writes it with her blood, she just writes it whenever she can. She's trying to be very secretive about it. This is a very visceral book. If you cannot handle things done to human body, very awful things done to human body, don't read this book. Definitely do not read it. I would say it was very hard for me to get through it. It's a book that talks about misogyny and religious trauma and indoctrination, power balance, well, imbalance in this case. The next book is a bit more sci-fi than horror. It's very short and it's very easy to get through. And it is about alien invasion. That would be The Seep by Chana Porter. Is about what would happen if aliens invaded the Earth, but their invasions actually helped people. Earth is invaded by this alien collective called the Seep. And the Seep seeps into everything. So not only your mind, but into every single thing on Earth. Everything is different. And now humans can basically become whatever they want. They can look however they want. They can make whatever they want. You don't need money. You don't need anything. Everybody are happy. It's like very, very utopian. Also, they're very drugged. Everybody are very, very drugged constantly. They are on the Seep. The Seep is kind of like some opioids that we have in real world. Our main character, Trina. Trina is a transgender woman and she is in this very lovely marriage with her wife, Dana. But Dana, after the Seep invasion starts to happen, few years after, she decides that she maybe wants to transition into something else. She wants to become a little kid again and experience life all over again. So she leaves her wife. And now Trina is very sad, very depressed. She doesn't feel very optimistic, although she's in a very utopian world. Very philosophical book, actually. So it talks about what perfection is. And would perfection make us all happy? What is utopia? And could it ever really exist? If you think about it without dark, there wouldn't be any light. So without any sadness in the world, there wouldn't be any happiness. And this Seep, it kind of is trying to take every single sad thing, every problem in this world, every wrong decision. It kind of makes everything not wrong, it makes everything happy. Is it actually happy if there's no sadness? If you like sci-fi stories and if you like stories about love and loss and questions of the universe, read this book and think about it very much. The next book is another sci-fi book, but this is a completely sci-fi book, and it is This Is How You Lose the Time War by Max Gladstone and Amal El-Mohtar. We have two POVs, one is red and one is blue. And red and blue are these entities that are fighting with each other. So red is working for one agency and the blue is working for another agency. Their job is to travel through time and to kind of disrupt each other's intervention across history. So they are basically enemies. This is a very enemy to lovers story. Through time, they are leaving each other's first taunting notes, like, haha, I came here before you. And then they start to have a little bit of more private conversation with each other. They start to talk to each other in a different manner. They become friends and they start to have feelings for each other. It is very forbidden kind of romance, but written in such a peculiar, such a lyrical way that you will probably not find in any other book. This book is an award-winning book. Personally, when I read this book the first time, I didn't really enjoy it that much. I do want to reread it because maybe it just wasn't time for me to read this book. Maybe it's just not a book for me. But I do see why this book is so well loved and why it was awarded. It is a very original book. It is a very poetic book. If you're into romance books, but you want to go kind of explore other kind of genres, try to read This Is How You Lose the Time War. And the last book that I will be talking about today is another very lyrical, prosaic, poetic book that I have is The Spear Cut Through Water by Simon Jimenez. This is an epic fantasy. This is a road trip story and it is inspired by Polynesian mythology. This is one of those stories that has story in it and then story in the story. It is kind of just infinite storytelling. We have two characters that we are following on this road trip, June and Kima. They have this quest that they need to do. They are transporting Moon Goddess outside of this city and they are trying to take her someplace safe. We are following them through a course of 5 days and each of the days they have to another obstacle to get through. The way it was written, it is very dreamlike, it's very vivid. And this country that they're traveling to is stricken by poverty. The emperor of this country is a very tyrannical leader. It was a very interesting book as well for me to read this one. And I read it in my last month's vlog. If you want to get a bit more into fantasy, this is a standalone. It is a long book. It is 500 something page book. This is another one of those books that you will probably not find a lot of books similar to this one. The way it's written, it's very interesting. The way it's structured, the imagination that went into it, and the way it incorporated mythology and incorporated real-world problems in this book. This is the last one, and I need to say some more things about this book because in my last month's vlog, I did promise to talk about this book in whatever my next video is going to be. I did give, in the end, this book 4 stars just because the ending was kind of too long for me and it kind of dragged out in the end. I didn't really care for all the fighting scene, but everything that I said about it still stands, that I did enjoy the characters, that I did enjoy this road trip and the way it was written, everything stands. But yeah, just I did give it in the end 4 stars. Those are my 10 recommendations for queer books that you should read this month. I hope you will read at least one of those. All of these books are amazing books and you will get something from each one of them. And that's it of this video. Thank you for watching. Thank you for sticking with me through this very long video. I hope it won't be this long when I edit it. But that's it. I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!